Let's jump straight into this because we are looking at a truly monumental shift in India's defense policy today. We're talking about a move that is literally rewriting how the nation builds its weapons. It's a historic decision, one that gives an unprecedented boost to domestic arms production and that long-held dream of complete self-reliance. I'm really excited to guide you through this explainer today because the ripple effects of this are just massive.
To give you a quick roadmap of where we're heading, we'll start by unpacking this historic policy shift, then look at how it breaks the traditional PSU monopoly, and dive into the strategic production advantages. After that, we absolutely have to talk about the critical security and tech leakage risks, the execution challenges and threat of monopolies, and finally, what the road to true self-reliance actually looks like. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, a historic defense policy shift. Recently, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh approved a highly classified, game-changing transition for India's conventional missile technology.
So, here's the core of it. The goal is incredibly ambitious. The government is essentially taking these highly advanced missile programs out of the pure development stage, which has pretty much always been locked down by the Defense Research and Development Organization, or DRDO, and pushing them straight into large-scale industrial manufacturing by private domestic companies. If you look at this through a geopolitical lens, New Delhi is aggressively cutting down its reliance on importing weapons from places like Russia, and instead, they're building a massive, formidable defense ecosystem right at home.
Now, before anyone thinks this is just a free-for-all where any company can suddenly start building missiles in their backyard, it's not. Private companies are going to have to survive intense security and regulatory audits to even get a glimpse of this tech. We're talking rigorous qualification, mandatory certification, strict security clearances, and stringent regulatory approvals. It's a grueling process just to look at the blueprints. Moving on to Section 2, breaking the PSU monopoly. To really grasp why this is such a huge deal, we have to understand how things used to operate versus where we're going.
The contrast between the old way and the new way is absolutely stark. For decades, we had a sluggish, government-bottlenecked system. The DRDO would design it, government-run PSUs would build it, and private companies, well, they were just tiny subcontractors supplying minor parts. But under this new system, qualified private enterprises become full-fledged equal development and production partners. They'll be working hand-in-hand with the DRDO for the complete assembly, integration, and full-scale testing of these weapons. It's a total paradigm shift.
But of course, there are boundaries. While conventional missiles, think the Astra, Akash, Nag, and Pralay, are likely falling under this new framework, the absolute most critical strategic assets are staying firmly in-house. Nuclear weapons, strategic range ballistic missiles, and the core command and control infrastructure are strictly off-limits to the private sector. So conventional warfare goes private, but the apocalyptic stuff stays with the government. Let's dive into Section 3, the strategic production advantages. What actually happens to the nation's military readiness when the private sector takes over the assembly lines? Historically, even when a missile passed all its trials, scaling up for mass production took years. It was incredibly slow. By injecting multiple private companies armed with modern automation, efficiency, and private capital into the mix, India can rapidly build up its stockpiles. This guarantees a continuous supply capacity during wartime, drastically cuts down on foreign dependence, and insulates the military from geopolitical sanction pressures. Plus, it finally frees up the DRDO's brilliant minds to focus strictly on next-generation R&D, all while private market competition naturally drives down the cost of each missile. It's a win-win. And think about the economic ripple effect here. A missile isn't just one solid object. It's made up of thousands of highly complex components. This move empowers thousands of MSMEs, micro, small, and medium enterprises across the country to supply the batteries, sensors, software, and wiring that feed into the larger defense giants doing the final integration. It builds a deeply localized supply chain right near the borders with Pakistan and China, making maintenance, repairs, and midlife upgrades so much faster. Just to put the sheer scale of this self-reliance push into perspective, get this, the Indian Air Force has already indigenized a staggering 97% of its operational fighter space in just the last 5 years alone. 97%. That is a monumental, rapid shift toward truly made-in-India defense. And the momentum isn't slowing down. The Defense Ministry just recently dropped a list of 405 specific defense items marked exclusively for local production. That list alone represents over 3,000 crore rupees in business potential. The defense sector in India is opening up in ways we've literally never seen before. But, and this is a big but, we have to talk about Section 4, critical security and leakage risks. Because this euphoric push for self-reliance brings a very real, very dangerous dark side. You have to ask yourself, what happens when highly sensitive military data is no longer sitting on a secure, air-gapped government server? When it's suddenly shared across multiple private contractors, hundreds of corporate employees, and various commercial cloud storage systems, the threat matrix expands exponentially. We are talking about the crown jewels of national defense here: flight control algorithms, highly classified propellant chemistry, and warhead designs. If a hostile nation orchestrates a targeted cyber attack to steal these secrets, or worse, if an insider threat within one of these private corporations gets compromised, the resulting tech leakage could be a catastrophic blow to national security. And beyond just data theft, there's the terrifying risk of quality control failure. These aren't consumer electronics. These are life-saving weapons used in active wartime. If a private company decides to cut corners on raw materials just to bump up their quarterly profit margins, a single defective circuit board could mean a missile fails to launch when soldiers need it most. Basic, standard corporate quality certifications simply aren't going to cut it here. The DRDO is going to have to enforce absolutely brutal, unrelenting audits. That brings us right into Section 5, monopolies and execution challenges. Because aside from security, the financial and bureaucratic hurdles for the private sector to actually pull this off are towering. Right now, reports show that just to be considered for this technology transfer, a company needs a minimum 100 crore turnover and has to prove they've been profitable for 2 of the last 5 years. While that makes sense for stability, it completely locks out smaller, highly innovative aerospace startups. The government might accidentally be shutting the door on the next Steve Jobs of defense tech just because they're working out of a small lab, leaving only a handful of massive corporate giants to monopolize the entire market. On top of that, setting up secure explosive handling facilities and flight test capabilities costs an absolute fortune. If there are the usual bureaucratic delays in finalizing government orders, these private companies could face catastrophic financial losses while maintaining these expensive facilities. And think about the legal nightmare. If a privately built missile misfires during a test, who gets blamed? The DRDO for a design flaw, or the private company for a manufacturing error? It's a mess. Plus, while India dreams of exporting these weapons, international regulations and end-user certifications make the export market incredibly tricky to navigate. Which finally brings us to Section 6, the road to true self-reliance. How does the government actually navigate this massive double-edged sword and ensure this policy succeeds? First off, the government absolutely cannot afford to just hand these contracts out to whoever quotes the lowest price. That's a recipe for disaster. They have to establish crystal-clear rules where contracts are awarded based on past reliability, genuine production readiness, and ironclad cybersecurity. They also need to guarantee they have at least 2 qualified manufacturers for every weapon system to prevent those monopolies we talked about, and make sure those smaller MSMEs down the supply chain are actually getting paid on time. As top defense analysts have pointed out, merely transferring technology on paper doesn't mean a whole lot. Just doing basic screwdriver assembly of DRDO parts isn't true industry maturity. For this ambitious policy to actually be the masterstroke it's meant to be, the private sector has to mature enough to eventually design, innovate, and manufacture their own advanced electronics, seekers, and propulsion systems completely locally. At the end of the day, this is an incredible, bold leap forward for domestic manufacturing that hands tremendous power to Indian private companies. But the stakes have literally never been higher. So what do you think? Is the current system truly ready to keep these highly guarded secrets safe from cyber threats? Or is the risk of privatization just too great right now? It's a monumental shift, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.